All right, we are live. It is Thursday, May 20th. I can't believe I'm saying that. May 20th. And this is the really big class, New Music Edition. New Music Edition with a bit of Brahms. So I am just so thrilled that this is happening today. We just had a very brief, quick sound check, and we're ready to go. And we're shaking up the order a little bit. So if anyone is watching who's seen the last two classes, I started with some Q&A with my guests and sort of got a leisurely start into the class. But today, we're doing things differently because we have a performer in Germany with a curfew who has to be out of the building at a certain time. So we're going to launch into our performances a little bit sooner. But first, just a brief introduction. We have violinist Michelle Lee from the Tesla Quartet and composer Clifton Ingram. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Quick introduction. So Michelle, I met at the Banff Center. We were just remembering, I think it must have been 2016, something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
When your quartet was there, possibly in the festival after the competition. I'm trying to remember. Mark and I were up there producing some recordings, and I got to know your quartet there. And since then, I've become a real fan. I hope you know that. And especially in this last year of bizarre quarantine lockdown work. Michelle and I have had several conversations actually over the last year about ways to keep ourselves sort of going and motivated, and how to reach out to new audiences within lockdown. And I've been absolutely astounded by not just the quantity of things you and the Tesla have put out, and you've done both actually, which we'll talk about in a bit, sort of your solo work apart from the quartet as well. But you've done quite a few things, and man, the quality of what you guys have been able to do in very strange circumstances, starting with maybe one of the first things you did was with Cliff in the Quarantunes Zoom recording. So it's just been amazing to watch you work, and in this way, I can't wait to hear you on a stage again. I know you're starting to concertize. Yeah. So that's a tiny bit about Michelle. Astonishing violin player, great quartet, and just really exciting stuff. And then you have introduced me, and through you I get to introduce this group of people to Clifton Ingram, a composer. And I'm just going to read. Not everyone has access to the program that I put together that's up on Facebook, but I'm just going to read the first paragraph of Cliff's biography on his website, because I think it's beautiful. So, and I can't wait to sort of learn more about what you mean in what you've written. So I hope you don't mind. This is straight from your website.
Clifton, I wrote it.
He wrote it.
It's out there now, yeah.
Clifton Ingram is a DC/Boston-based composer and performer, rested field guitar and electronics, whose music aims to approach and retreat from itself along fault lines of musical and extra-musical. Clifton's music revolves around the delicate obstinance of hidden objects, aberrant mutations, and self-devouring ornamentation, and obsessive canon-like structures, the masked expression of an unreliable narrator. So that's quite a mission statement there. And I can't wait to hear what that means to you. Just reading those words makes my imagination for sound light up. So when you talk about, delicate obstinance and mutations and ornamentation, and I too am a fan of canons. So your obsessive canon-like structures, I can't wait to hear more about that. So that is a launching point for today's class. Now, my thought about bringing new music to the really big class, which primarily has been a violin masterclass series, although we've explored orchestra excerpts. We've explored jazz improv. We've done whole classes on Beethoven. I mean, we've done quite a bit of things, and quite a few things in the past year. But I really wanted to close out the class. This will be its final month in May, with the idea of connecting music of today, music being written now, with music of the past, sometimes in a very direct line, because sometimes a piece of music from the standard repertoire is a direct inspiration for something new. But also in a more abstract way, like thinking about how playing music of today makes us look differently at music of Brahms or Bach or anyone from the past, and also how we bring our sort of older eyes to things of the present. So I just really feel like there's this continuum that's worth exploring, and fun and interesting, and maybe a little more not more exciting, because what could be more exciting than figuring out how to play the violin really well, but just a different way of looking at music and to talk about music. So with that in mind, we are going to get straight to our first performance, which is of a Brahms sonata. We're starting with the old today. Our violinist is Laura, and I hope I'm saying your pianist's name correctly. It's Jihwan. They're in Germany, and we'll share this beautiful performance of Brahms, and then I'm going to turn things over to Cliff and Michelle and get things going. So enjoy this, and yeah, let's go.
Yay! Fantastic. Thank you so much, Laura and Jihwan, for playing this piece. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed it. I was talking to Clifton a little while ago about Brahms. Yeah, weren't we talking about that? I have a complicated relationship with Brahms, shall we say. For the longest time, I just felt like, when I was younger, I did play this many times, but I'm still questioning if I ever played it. You know what I mean? I did I really play it? Because I always felt like I was just never big enough for it. I never fulfilled the journey of this piece. And not long ago, I was talking to Mr. Mark Steinberg about the parallel between Hamlet and Bartók's second string quartet. Fascinating. But any great stories like Hamlet, has some sort of drama that you can easily relate to a good piece like Bartók's second quartet. And I was like looking at this Brahms, given that you're going to be playing, it just kind of clicked with me that, I don't know, you're familiar with the Odyssey, Greek myth at all? Yeah. One thing I always, due to pandemic, I had some time, right? Last year, I watched a bunch of Odyssey and stuff like that. And it just kind of clicked to me how these immortal beings always want to be mortal, even though they have this empowering position of being a god. They are most dramatic, they're most emotional, they get angry a lot, they fall in love so much, right? So it kind of like clicked with me that this particular piece to me it's that kind of story. Like there's somebody who's certain, statue, like a higher statue, constantly searching for themselves, who they are, and wanting to establish, but yet also proud in some ways. I don't know, Cliff, do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I will admit that when I was in undergrad, along with music, I actually got a minor in classics. And I studied Latin, so I wasn't a sort of professional Greek or ancient Greek sort of person, but they, of course, throughout high school and undergrad, I think I maybe was assigned to read the Odyssey like 3 or 4 or 5 times.
Oh my God.
And so I'm very familiar with with the Odyssey.
Oh yes.
And what you said about the sort of immortal beings versus the mortal is very true. They're exaggerated people and but even beyond that, to give it more of a mortal spin for us mere mortals, right? That's interesting because the way I hear this movement is, which I'm not a violinist myself, so I'll admit that right away. And so I haven't spent a lot of time with this one. And the way I hear it is that there's, of course, a theme, and it keeps returning. But even in a really sort of literal, programmatic sense that tells the story of the hero's journey. So there's, I'm forgetting exactly what year, but it's sort of all the stuff that Star Wars is based on. You have, what's his name? I think is it Joseph Campbell? I believe it is. It's just sort of the idea of the monomyth, that across mythology there is often sort of a basic structure of the story, and a lot of that that part of that story has to do with what they call katabasis, which is the hero goes into the underworld and then comes out of the underworld. In the Odyssey, he literally goes to the underworld.
Yes.
And most of the epic poems sort of have that too. Even the Aeneid has this. And he visits his father, and his father tells him all about the glories of Rome, etc. But I hear that once you said that, I was like, oh, funny, because there is, of course, this sort of moment, maybe about 2/3 of the way through the movement, where the theme is low. And so to me, I hear it in terms of where the theme is positioned in the register of the violin. So when the theme goes low, you're in the underworld in a sort of way. But interestingly enough, if I remember correctly, it's sort of a sweeter moment. It's a tender moment, or
Mhm.
perhaps vulnerable would be the term that I would pull out there. But
It's
I mean,
even marked as a sort of voce sempre as well. So there you go. Prove your
okay,
point right there, Cliff. Yeah.
hey, um, but no, I thought it was great. I think you both played very well together.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Yeah,
there's a
one of
lot
the
of
hardest thing as a performer. Oh, sorry.
no, please.
Yeah, yeah. For this piece is that this friction. How are you gonna deal with this friction of constant swell, right? Between two of you, between Laura and Jihwan. Sometimes you line up very nicely of the hairpins, feeling the friction together. Sometimes you actually disagree on where the measure has to go towards to or come from, right? So that to me was always challenging. And even like you looking at third measure, fourth measure, you don't always start the crescendo together and end the crescendo together. Not like that. Like even the third measure is different than fourth measure. And the next time you have the swells measure 7 and 8, again, Jihwan has no more swells, right? So crescendos and decrescendos. So it's a constant friction that really drives the music, and it's not a comfortable feeling. It's so not comfortable because you're just kind of like your skin is getting rubbed by something so sandy, and who likes that feeling? I don't. So but that's what the energy is coming from, even though the piano quality that's given, that just, yeah. So like to me that's really really important aspect. I know you already know that you're already doing it so beautifully, but maybe you can even go deeper to find like what that means. That it's not how you're gonna play it. It's more of a why is there.
Yeah.
Why, right? After all, there are many other choices, right? So I constantly want to ask myself a question, why. Yeah. Cliff, anything?
Yeah, I think to hark back to what Michelle just said, we had sort of a brief conversation about Brahms a week or 2 weeks ago. I can't remember
Mm.
now. And my experience with Brahms is not so much through like the violin sonatas, but I my first instrument was clarinet, and so I played a good amount of Brahms on clarinet, but I also happened to be in choruses. And so I probably sang more Brahms than I played Brahms on clarinet. Uh, and so that's sort of always my entry point. And of course, plenty of folks complain about Brahms's choral music on some level. There is always where do you breathe sort of question, and I think that comes from what Michelle and I talked about. Maybe the biggest point that I remember, which was that Brahms is constantly sort of hiding the bar line. And this is something that's very well known, of course, and you've played the piece, so you know this too. But there's always this sense of what I would call like elision.
Mm.
It's sort of like the way French, when one word, the end of the word will go into the next word,
Mm.
allons-y sort of thing, and so that's always and as a wind player playing Brahms on clarinet, I remember this very well and singing it as well because it's a constant question of in the musical world what we would call cantabile, which is like how do we sing it, and so breath support and how to do that, and that's not something the violin has to worry about, but I think what Michelle was talking about in terms of the breathing is very there, and also the friction. My sense of the friction is perhaps a very sort of technical one within the thing. This movement always feels like to me it's not a waltz, but it feels like a dance in three that's
Mm.
somehow trapped or sort of pushed into and contained by, or maybe not contained to a degree, by common time, by 4 beats per measure, and that's really interesting to me as a composer.
Mm.
So that's the thing that I think would, beyond the fact that you both played it very beautifully. What are the next steps, right? The what, why, and how do we do things? And so one of the big things for me is to how do you make the moments, like the big moments, or where that friction sort of resolves itself, that could be a moment, or where the friction is the most tense, where there's the most friction, that would also probably be the moment, right? Those are probably the moments for me. And so my big question for you, as just a general thing, is to think about how do you make those sort of more eventful, or more memorable, or whatever it is that you're looking for to get. And because this is Brahms, and the performance practice and the score is the way it is, and I'm a composer, so I'm sorry, but I sort of lean into what does the score say, and what does the score also not say. And so, for instance, in this piece, the score doesn't tell you where to bow. Like, there are no bow positions indicated. So that's a really interesting, like, that's a carte blanche for you. That's a moment for you to make really interesting decisions. And I noticed that in my score, it's page 11, but I think it's when the theme comes in on a piano, it's like the sweet moment, that you move the bow more soltasto. And I thought that was excellent. And that just that slight movement of the bow changes the tone and the pitch, or not the pitch, but the tone, the timbre, right, of the moment, and it made it very eventful. And so my question is, how can we tweak little moments like that? Can you go more sol pont? Can you go more soltasto in other moments as well? I was trying to keep an eye on your bow throughout, just because this is something that fascinates me about the violin as a composer, just to see how much it changed throughout the piece. And it did, but it didn't change necessarily as dramatically as I was maybe expect. And so that's a question for me that I don't know. I'd be very curious as to what Michelle would also have to say about that.
No, that's an excellent point, really, because the bow is what makes sound after all. You can't go all day left hand only. Nobody's going to hear you. Yeah, that's totally a good point. And the bow speed and contact point really contributes to the termination of the timbre and the color that you're talking about, and thus the character. So that's why I'm circling back to what I was saying before, is the why. Why is really the driving question for you to come up with these answers. You want to try some a little bit if we have time. I think it would be cool to like do some little bit of the beginning and then jump to the underground to measure 84. You know, that the noodly part, just really a kind of muddy area. We're gonna jump to that. But basically, like for me, this is that there are 2.5 types of music here, right? One's flowy, more horizontal. One's more steady, proud, and vertical, right? So the horizontal music is more of a searching and kind of emotionally charged, say, like you're full of questions without answers. And that's when I think Cliff was saying that there is no bar lines. Right? There's no determination of bar lines. There you go. So full of questions without answers. And then the steady music, that's kind of vertical. The proudness is stable. You are emotionally also calm in that sense. You know who you are, at least in that given moment, even if it's a one measure. So there's a constant movement between the 2 to 3 characters. And sometimes you marry those two anyways. So you want to try some... because we have this privilege of having you on live. So why don't we hear some from a top, let's see. Let's go the first measure to 24-ish, if you have a measure number.
Until then, or from 24? From the beginning till 24?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, thank you. That was beautiful. So I think when we're searching for something, I don't know, maybe I'm introvert, so I don't announce my problems to other people normally. And when I'm searching something, I'm like more thinking from inside out. So like measure three, measure four, when you have this kind of swells, I think it can be just a slightly more personal. Like it's not a world to know you're going for that questionable moment, which is the last eighth note. So I wouldn't, in other words, simple words, um, don't swell too fast, and just really enjoy the moment of friction between two of you, the piano and violin, until the last moment that you just have to ask one more question to that. Yeah. And I think also Jihwan can also help shape better throughout the longer swells, like your triplets, yum bum bum bim bum 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 bum, that kind of stuff. Do it more with her. In fact, the piece was written for pianist, Hungarian pianist. So your shoulder is kind of heavy on this piece. So yeah, let's do one more time. Just having that a certain quality that's a little more only matters to you, you know. Wow, I got like goosebumps. Like that was awesome. Thank you so much, right? Cliff, what did you think? I really enjoyed that. That was
Yeah, I
great.
think there's more exaggeration of what's happening, and I mean, it's romantic music, so that's we're gonna have our hearts on our sleeve, right? But
Mm,
um, I think that's something about the difference between what you just did and what the video was like is that I think with what you just did, it seems like you have more room to go. Like there's more room to grow, in fact, to go and to grow. um,
mm-hmm.
so and that's I think always something that's super hard about music. That's always a challenge.
Mm,
And you don't want to sell. I mean, you don't want to test the patience of the audience by quiet song, like quiet loud, quiet loud, quiet loud. Like that could become redundant. And how do you
mm.
create? It might be in the grander scheme beyond the passage that you just did. How to structure that or how to perform that for me as a listener, it has to do with how the performers create a pattern and then how they break the pattern. It's not just about what logically makes sense, but also how do you make decisions that you can do. But I love Michelle's analogy here in terms of the question at the end, that final little phrase that you have.
Can I
Oh yes, please.
would you say that like this little question, like the little eighth note, like we were thinking about it so much, of course, because of this little tiny swell, and would you would you that say that there should be some time because now you said something about breaking the expectation. So I was wondering if it should go only with dynamics or should it also have a little moment of like time, maybe?
I love the fact that you said that because I always feel like this is a way of kind of manipulating the time. I don't know. I wasn't really planning on going into that, but but I love the fact that you said it because time feels differently to everyone. Like sometimes you practice 1 hour and I'm like, good, go where you feel like I just practiced 3 hours, but it's only been an hour. And sometimes you practice 3 hours and you're like, oh, that 3 hours went by, right? So again, like that's what I go back to, like what I said. It's really personal choices, and then the pattern once is established. When there is an expectation came in, that's change of direction. That's telling you something else. So even measure three and 4 establish something together, but yet you change something in measure 7 and 8. So yeah, so you know what I mean? So it's constant evolvement, and that's something that you can work with. Totally, I think you should go for it. The more you find that moments that's special and that turns a knob just a tiny bit more, then you will speak louder anyways, right?
Yeah, I think, and to add on to just to answer your question, Laura, for me, it's not so much about, oh, does a passage should you slow down in this moment or should you speed up? There's not necessarily a right answer for me. In fact, for I'm going to call this period music. For historical music, for non-contemporary music in that way, the thing that pulls me back to listening to recordings of people playing it is how they make those decisions. It's sort of like the I mean, this is maybe a trite example, but it's like the Glenn Gould sort of situation where I don't always agree with what I think is the Bernstein quote, right? I don't always agree with Glenn's decisions, but I respect them because they're interesting. And so that final statement, that da, 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 right? You could speed it up, and then the question becomes urgent. Or you could slow it down, and it becomes a hesitant moment for you. And it depends on how you feel about it, and how, like, what that means for you, sort of. But this gets into sort of the rhetoric of the why that Michelle keeps talking about, which is like, why are you doing things? And I think since this is chamber music and you're playing with somebody else, the common practice here is to come up with a story that happens throughout the thing. And it's not that the audience needs to know that story. It could be about anything. It could be about the Odyssey. It could be about your cat. You're like roaming around the apartment, investigating stuff, and then you leave and you come home. I have a cat. He's like wandering around here somewhere. So, but it's not so much about the audience needs to know this thing, but it's a story that can unite the two of you together. And I think this is common practice with quartet playing as well. That I'm not sure if Tesla does funny little stories about animals, but
we sure do. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. And you can make it fun too. I mean, it makes rehearsing fun, and whatever can make it, whatever can get you focused in is the way to go for me. So
cool.
I think that we're running out of time for you because you have to be out of the building. And
yeah,
that true? Yeah, I don't. Just let us know if we're.
Yeah. I think Cicely's just at the times. It's time to wrap up. But I'm just gonna say one more thing in the perspective. Just listening to you, measure 29. That moment to me is pretty significant because not for the violin's sake, but in a piano part, this is the first time we have. Oh, here he comes. 4 quarter notes. Right. There's never a moment until that. There's a clear sense of defined structure until measure 29, right? It's a long time to get there. Usually people start with the quarter note, but not this one. So for me, that 29, that bum, 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 that's like, that establishes something, even, So like, I really want to say that loud. I don't think we're gonna get to the underground today. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So you're gonna play that, Laura and Jihwan, in that spot. So we're gonna go pick up where we left. So we're gonna go right at. Just play the last. Da dum ba 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 bum 20. Pick up to 22, and play up until 37, 38. Sorry. Beautiful. Yeah. That really shake up things, because now again breaking the patterns, right? You suddenly have this stability at 29, and guess what happened 30? You break the whole thing apart, right? Boom, 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 right? And then at 34, you pick up, Laura, just completely rephrasing the whole four measures. It's lovely when you really demonstrate these kind of friction and change of direction in more detailed sense. Because, for sonatas, I've done this many times, and I'm so guilty of that. It's just kind of easy to play through. You know what I mean? So it's going to play easy to like paint this wall, paint that wall, I'm done, right? But it has so much more in it. So, and that's why I'm saying I don't think I've actually played it. Thank you so much for you two for sharing this music with us. Yeah. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you. Absolutely brilliant playing. Before you have to go, do you have any questions, Laura or Jihwan, for these two while you have them captive on Zoom?
I mean, my main question was the one with the little crescendo decrescendo thing, because that's, I don't know, a bit of a confusing kind of thing that Brahms said. So I think, and I don't know, the overall ideas was really nice. So for me, there's no questions. Do you have any questions? Yeah, he said he had the same question. Excellent.
The last time you played the opening phrase, and I think you really leaned into that the eighth note at the end of the bar there, like a bit more than you had previously. And I think that's the spirit of it for me, where it really leads you into the downbeat, but the emphasis is not there on the downbeat, which creates this sort of inertia. It creates this movement that it can't be stopped on that level. You don't want it to stop. And that's the beautiful part about that last little like and I felt you push it there at the last time that you played it too, like in terms of the speed. And that gave you that also did the same thing that hairpin figure does too. And I think that's great. You just keep going through the whole movement like that, which of course that's where the work happens, right?
But, it's worth it,
and that's great. I think you're definitely on the right track. It's a solid basis that you have right now, and you just have to make it yours.
Exactly. Yeah. Great job.
I'll just interject one thing, that last time that you played that I don't have the score in front of me, but as you finished up bar 24, I felt like you played it as if you didn't know the answer to your question, which is a different feeling than when you play something. We work so hard at lining everything up and making everything beautiful. We always know what comes next in our heads, but we have to play as if we have no idea. And that last time, for me, that really captured that. Like, you finished the little phrase, and then you did something that was really beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you for all the effort you went to make this happen, Laura and Jihwan. Thank you. It's wonderful to meet you and to hear you play. It's gorgeous playing.
Ooh, yes,
I'm going to watch it again later, I think. It was very moving.
Thank you.
I get to ask a few questions now of Michelle and Cliff. So, and I just want to follow up. I told you the questions I was going to ask you, and I'm going to say completely different things. I'm so sorry.
Great.
So, Michelle, you mentioned you have this complicated relationship with Brahms. And I have to tell you that I do too. And I always have. I've never felt like I was strong enough or sort of big enough. And I remember one of the last things the Cypress Quartet did was we recorded the sextets.
Oh, wow.
And I love those pieces so much, and I've wanted so much to bring something, epic to them. And you always feel like you're just not quite there. I hope someday to overcome that. And I would try to imagine that I was Oistrakh or something, just bigger person, bigger arms. But so it's really wonderful for me to hear.
I so agree with you. Oh my goodness. Yeah. No, I feel like I have to put up another like a fat suit or something. Go high up on the building and play. Maybe then it will work. But
I like that image of being high up and like sort of looking down. But I also really love the analogy that you're making to sort of the hero's story and of the heroes wanting to be mortal. And I'm when I go back to some of these pieces, I'm going to take that to that. And I really love that idea. I think it's really apt. And for this sonata, I think maybe especially nice. So, but that's not really a question. That's just a mood on that. But I am going to ask you some questions now, and they're the ones I promised you. So, as we are here talking about sort of the experience of playing music both old and brand new, Michelle, my favorite question to ask is, do you remember the first time you played something by a living composer, and what was that like?
Okay, I'm gonna be honest, I don't. The reason is because, when you first meet composer on the paper, well, when I was young, we always play old music, so you assume they're all dead. and then later on, like, oh, actually, they're not all dead. And also, you don't get to always meet the composer, so it doesn't, really sink in with you, the fact that they're living. Until I went to Indiana University and start really actively working with the living composers at my school, just working music together, just making it like, it's like making sourdough bread, right? Like you make a roux, but then you wait until it becomes something alive. And it was that kind of process that really made me fall in love with the new music, which ended up, it was a lot of fruitful events, recordings, and even today I have a very great memory of working with these composers. So I don't think I really answered your question, but
No, you absolutely did. And, I have to say, I had to ask myself the same question last week, and I kind of had a similar thing. Like, I remember the first times of, like, really working one-on-one with someone and making it together. I mean, it was coming from their brain, but, when you're the one sort of making the noise, and sometimes it was absolutely noise. And just to follow up to that, I know that the Tesla and you yourself have really invested a lot of time in new music. How do you feel it's changed the way you see music by Bach or Beethoven or Mozart or anyone?
That's a fantastic question. For me, it hasn't changed anything, to be honest. Because whether it is the current music or the past, music from the past, it somehow, there's a center of music never leaves, right? So it's a branching out of the core music, whatever that music means to you. It's always there, but then you just branch out to this type of music and that type of music and the past to new. That's kind of how I see music. So I always go back to the center of whatever the music means to me, right? So it didn't really change much, but I have a better understanding of structure, harmonic language, all this detail that makes music unique to that person, right? Whoever that is, as you mentioned, Bach or Cliff. So
yeah, I don't know if you've ever had this, and I'm just going to keep asking questions because I'm thinking of them. Have you had experiences where you like keep going back to the same composer for new pieces, either yourself or with the quartet?
Yeah, let's see. There are some pieces we always go back just because, well, it's like one of people's favorite piece and it's just the right length of something. And it's one of the Wolf Serenade. I don't know you. Yeah, right? I had the hardest time learning that piece. It's very short. It's about less than 6 minutes, probably less than that, maybe 4 minutes or so. But I couldn't understand the language, even though it's perfectly tonic, perfectly sane. But the meter, I don't know. We go back there almost every season, and every season I'm just sweating because it's just I have to play that piece again. um, for quartet, that's like that. For my personal thing is always Bach, of course. Is I don't know, it's a little lame answer, but when Cliff and I we decided to do this thing together, it was happened to be the time when there was a lot of hate crimes in the United States against Asians and, you know, the colored people and stuff. So it really depressed me for a little while. And whenever I feel sorry about what's going on in the world, I just take out the Bach and play this Andante movement. And that's a kind of way of comforting myself, right? So I shared that info with Cliff, and he took it to the next level now. But yeah, so that's kind of how I see it.
Very cool. So that's going to switch my focus to you, Cliff. So you mentioned, and I'm really glad you did, because I didn't see in your bio that you played the clarinet. So that was was the clarinet your first musical instrument?
Yes, it was my first instrument, and I remember I started in the 4th grade. So I wasn't one of those folks that sort of grew up with music very, very early, but relatively early. And I picked the clarinet because I remember the guy that came and demoed all the instruments. And it was like an instrument rental thing. In fact, I have the clarinet here. It's like an old plastic. Yeah, it's terrible. It's great. But he played the MASH, the TV show theme, and I really loved that show as a kid because my mom loved the show, so I used to watch it with her. And I immediately was like, oh, I want to play that one. And so I did, and it was a lucky choice. Clarinet is sort of one of those instruments you can pick up relatively quickly, that you could really start playing quickly. And my sister picked the flute, and so her progression was a bit slower because the embouchure and everything. And from there, I just started. Music. Prior to that, I was really into visual art, and so I was really into the idea that I had this whole idea that I was going to become a painter, which I think about now, and I'm like, huh, interesting, because my music tends to be sort of landscape-esque on some level, maybe, or sometimes I think about it in that way. And so I started playing more instruments from clarinet. I think the next one was I played handbells for a while, which is really interesting. If there are any handbell choirs out there that want to commission a piece, let me know. Because I would love to do some really strange things with handbells. But what else did I do? I mean, I played piano, although I'm a terrible pianist. I sang a lot in choruses and in sort of madrigal formats and chamber formats. Eventually, in middle school, I picked up the guitar, and that was sort of more the beginning of those rebellious teenage years. And I think the thing that drew me to guitar was that I wanted to play in a band with my friends, and we were playing rock music for the most part, and we got really into playing these sort of epic, weird things where there was a lot of improvisation happening. We listened to a lot of Pink Floyd at the time, and yeah, which it's funny to me now. But and it sort of took off from there, and I was very lucky to have some friends of mine that we pushed each other. And one of my really close friends growing up in Northeast Vermont. So this is really rural too. We don't have an orchestra, and there's a lot of winter, so you need to find hobbies. And so my friend Ben Boy and I started playing jazz together and learning how to play jazz, and that really sealed the deal for me with guitar. So I transitioned to guitar, and I started playing a lot of jazz. And at the time, I wasn't really that into classical music anymore because jazz is something that you develop your own language on some level. And that was probably the beginning of me starting to become a composer in that way. And I started writing little jazz heads, like tunes, and also at the same time I was playing a lot of rock music, like we would call it math rock now. So this would be like the late 90s. And so yeah, get your calculators out. Sort of lots of I don't. Have you ever heard that term, math rock?
I've never heard that term, and it's fascinating. Math rock.
Math rock is basically like if you took all of the progressive rock from the 70s, and sort of put it into a punk or post-punk sort of thing. So it's a bit more aggressive. Some of it's very, very nice in melodic. Like I think American Football is a band that's back in action these days, and they had like a revival. And I was in a coffee shop, and I was like, is this what's happening? And somebody was like, oh yeah, man, they're back. And I was like, oh, that's so weird. It's like my childhood is returning. And so that's the thing, is I was really into, by the time I finished high school, I was really into bands like Sonic Youth. I was really into noise music. And I think when you get into this, that sort of idea of texture being a musical thing, you immediately sort of get into that John Cage or post John Cage thing where everything is music. And it sort of blossomed from there when I was an undergrad, and I had some teachers who pushed us to do weird things. And meanwhile, I was always obsessed with sort of more of the modern jazz thing. So the harmonies are really out. It's very complex in terms of how you have to meld, and how can you be lyrical while the chords are modulating so quickly and everything.
So in a sense, though, you could just be describing Brahms right there, because I think of Brahms completely as texture, like textural music, where you've got, I mean, in the beginning of that sonata, where you've got this beautiful melodic line on top, and then it's sort of a droning bass line, and this noise texture in the middle that you can't quite hear what it is, all modulating in what then would have been kind of unusual ways. So it's, I mean, the language that obviously your music is going to sound very different. We'll hear that in a bit, but it is kind of curious how these things are not, so different. I mean, they come from somewhere, I guess is what I'm saying. So all of this makes me dying to know how the two of you met, how Michelle and Cliff, you sort of met and started collaborating. I don't know who wants to answer that.
Yeah, Michelle's like, you do it. We actually were introduced to each other via GLF Cam, which is Gabriella Lena Frank's Academy of Creative Music. Am I getting it right? I've just said GLF Cam so many times that I've forgotten what the acronym was, maybe. Apologies, Gabby. But she introduced us because the pandemic had just hit, and she started an initiative with her organization where they were pairing composers and performers, usually in solo or duo formats. And they paid us a little bit of money, and we did it. And the idea of it was to do something quick, to sort of get visibility out there for musicians who were really suffering at that time.
Like an emergency fund help stuff. Yeah,
exactly.
So it was the turnaround was less than 2 months, I think?
Yeah.
From the composition to the recording, it was rather really quick. Yeah,
it was pretty fast. And so I ended up writing this odd sort of Samuel Beckett-esque thing, solo violin, where there was fixed media. That was a thing that I made out of radio static that I recorded and manipulated, and there was also a lamp that Michelle was turning off and on. So I went big and wrote her this sort of strange theater piece, and she took it on and did it, and that sort of subsequently turned into the Tesla thing as well.
Alternating current project that we did. Yeah. Well, there was it was like April sometime last year, there was an article came out from New York Times about suffering musicians like Tesla. So I actually made a front page. It's not a good occasion though, so I don't know, I should be happy about it or not. But
very good article though.
Very fantastic article. Jim Stewart. In fact, I just saw him yesterday. He wrote this beautiful article for us. And after that, there were numerous help came through to Tesla, and we thought, why not continue this giving? Like, it would be shame to just finish here. Like, okay, thank you, and walk away. So we set aside a certain fund to help our fellow composer friends to write a little thing, not too much pressure, especially with the Beethoven being a birthday and all. We choose 12 composers to work with this Beethoven theme from Opus 18 number 5, the beautiful theme. And one of the composers we selected was Cliff. Yeah.
And I ended up writing that. I made a score that was intended for them to record live, like via a sort of telecommunications, like a Zoom. I think we did it in Zoom. And so it was sort of created so that the time lag could compensate a little bit, because they were all I think they were in 3 different locations at that time. And so that was that's an interesting challenge, and I really enjoyed doing that. That was fun.
Oh yeah, we sure enjoyed playing it, and it's you made the score so beautifully that you compensating with others because they're far away. One was in Texas, one was somewhere else. But somehow it works so beautifully well together without knowing that you're compensating it. So that worked beautifully. Yeah.
Yeah, I posted, and I'll flag it again. I posted it to the Facebook group for the really big class, and I had watched it when you initially did it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this worked, because a composer friend wrote one for me to do it. We just failed miserably. It didn't work at all. And then I tried to go into a whole thing with a looper, and my relationship with the looper lasted about a week, and then I put it on eBay.
Oh.
It was not for me. So it's really beautiful what you accomplished. I think we should get to some more music if that's feels good to you too. The next performer we have is Heather, and she is bringing us one of the miniatures by George Benjamin. I have absolutely fallen in love with this piece. I can't wait to learn it. I'd heard it before, but it had been a little bit of time. So this is the first of the 3 miniatures, and yeah, we'll get to it.
Yay! Thank you, Heather. That was beautiful. Wow.
You're very brave. I want to say that first. While I don't play the violin, this seems like one of those pieces to me that to play it is sort of just this really delicate. I mean, it's a miniature in the best sense. It's in George Benjamin, I think is at least in my heart is sort of known for picking his notes in just the right way and such. And it's like every moment matters, and that's like hard. That's so hard, right? And especially just the way that the piece, in my mind, it evaporates at the end. And that's a hard gesture in general, narratively, to pull off and just do it. And it's funny. I love the way that the violin sounds like. That what I mean by the evaporation is like that final harmonic. It's like you can hear the sound of the bow on the string along with the harmonic, and that's something to me that's really precious. Where that means it's like it's a human being with an instrument in a room. You know, it has when I can hear the sound of the instrument, and maybe in some level it's the sound of the instrument resisting the sort of production of the harmonic, the production of music, so to say. That really, for me, is sort of what I love about music in general. And I really love Baroque music in general, and I love period instruments for that reason. You have this sort of the sound of the instruments that people lean into, and that's really beautiful. And I thought that was a very nice touch at the end of your recording.
Yeah,
Michelle,
certainly.
do you have anything that you want to start off with?
Yeah, well, I never played the piece, but I don't know, like, you guys just picked the perfect program today, actually. I mean, Sicily, I mean, like, bravo, because this piece reminds so much of your music, Cliff, actually. Right? I mean, it's a perfect segue to your music that we're gonna be doing next. But this open string business, right? It's a big business here. And again, like, why is it there? You know, like, what does it add, and how do we want to make that come across? So that's a big question you're probably constantly asking. But this, open string, it's a few reasons, right? Like, it's sympathetic strings as well as harmonic, like adding to what you're playing. So again, what you're saying, evaporation, that you said, Cliff, perfect word for that. The last bits, the harmonic just goes against, throughout the whole violin, goes up and down. Yeah, so a few things, I guess I'm just kind of going back and forth with the thoughts. But yeah, so first one will be asking yourself of the sympathetic string, or is it adding a harmonic language? Two is, how do you make it effortless? Because the wind doesn't, it doesn't hit your face that sometimes. I mean, at least this type of breeze is gentle breeze, I think. So how do you make it effortless? That would be two things I will be working towards to. And just looking at the score, since I haven't played it, measure 20, like, to me, that's like, like, he suddenly, crash between the D and C sharp, like that moment. Again, you establish the pattern, starting at 17, sempre bene in tempo. It's always kind of, starting a little late or early, whatever. You constantly have been talking to each other in some fashion. And 20, you agree on that entrance, but yet harmonically it's much more tense, right? So that just grabbed me in that moment. I was like, that's interesting. Yeah, that's my little insight. And also I want to ask Cliff a question. Major 13, it's a whole measure being one harmony there, until 14, the last bit, it changes. But is there a purpose of notation being that way? Is that just because the complications of 15/16?
Yeah, that would be my guess. I think that he's made it 15/16, so it's one of those. It keeps the pattern of 3+2 happening, sort of the pulse. Yeah, so that's.
Can I just break in because I haven't shared a score of this because it would be wrong.
Oh yeah.
Can you just describe what you're looking at?
That's right. Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
So in general, yeah, the marking for this piece is lilting gently. And so there's a dotted eighth plus an eighth, and that's the general. There's always this 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2. That's all the beats. So the piece is notated constantly in either, I think, 10/16 or 15/16 for the most part.
Yeah.
And it really, I mean, it creates this sort of rocking thing, which actually leads to the question the first question that I want to ask Heather, which is this movement is titled A Lullaby for Lalit, which I believe is the daughter of Mystery, the violinist that George Benjamin wrote this piece for. And I wanted to ask you, Heather, like, how did you approach learning this piece in the context of it being a lullaby? Or how does this piece how is it a lullaby for you, and maybe how is it also strange for a lullaby? Because I'm imagining, playing this for a child.
Yeah. I don't know.
There are no wrong answers about this question. Period.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose I completely agree with you. It's very it's very soothing, but like in a very lopsided way and slightly strange. So I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's not like playing a Brahms lullaby. I don't have the same effect on kids. I don't know. I think instead of, I mean, obviously, I kind of thought about the melody and kind of tried to follow that as much, and the usual. But I think to me it's more of a kind of a kind of portrait of like a kid falling asleep, because I think the first half of it, there is a kind of soothing quality to it, but there's also bits where it's kind of unsettled, and you kind of might think that the child's putting up a bit of resistance to maybe a bath and bedtime routine. But then on the second page where the harmonics appear, I think that's more illustrative of someone like drifting off to sleep. Because I know he describes in his program note as a kind of, I think he uses the phrase, it kind of disappears into a ribbon of harmonics, and I just thought that's such a lovely image of kind of like just fluttering away all of your thoughts. I don't know. So less of a lullaby and maybe more of a just a scene, I suppose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Perfect.
I agree. And again, I think the 3+2 sort of aspect of it is the thing that sort of lulls you. That's the hypnotic rhythm that's constantly happening, and the way that Benjamin, either whether it's an eighth plus a 16th, or 3/16ths, or whatever combination, he's constantly changing it. So it's a bit the pulse is always there, but it's not exactly the most hypnotic thing. And when the piece does repeat itself, it begins to and in fact, in the score, there are actually these moments where it says you can play this like 3 to 4 times. There's sort of a player option.
Yes.
And you repeat that thing, and that's the hypnotic lullaby moment, right? That's like the rocking the baby to sleep in some way. And I totally agree. But it's like the crunchier moments that even during the I think the moment that Michelle pointed out, I forget what measure it was, but maybe it was 19, 20, 20, where you have these really crunchy pitches together, but they're played normally, and then there's more harmonics, right? I feel like that's sort of that moment that you're talking about, Heather, where it's like it's sort of I'm drifting off to sleep, my head's nodding, whoop, nope, I'm not, but
yeah, it's totally.
I think you're the way that you're approaching that makes total sense to me. I was just curious.
And if you see somebody like I don't have a baby, so I have no idea really, to be honest. But Cliff, you might know better than that. But if you are like, holding a baby and like kind of like having them to rock, it's never like 4/4, right? Like it's probably never like really a straight meter. So I'm thinking just of a lilt of like 3/2 nature. I think you described it so perfectly. And like what I thought in that second page, when I first went to Aldra, that ocean there is incredible. And I was learning Benjamin Britten at the time, and it just kind of like clicked, and it just the music made sense in that setting. But even what I experienced there that first night, I was walking along the beach because I had been in the plane for so long, and the wind just hit me. And sometimes you get kind of like a ring in your ear when you have a lot of wind come through you. I don't know, my ears may be weird, but you get kind of like high pitch, like that kind of changes a little bit by the friction of the wind, and it totally remind me of that when you play that second page, especially later on. It just like, ooh, like just a gust of wind that it remind me of the Aldra Beach quite a lot. One thing I thought it was interesting is the rest marking at major 15 and 16. It's interesting. So if you look at the piece until that point, there's not that many rests, isn't it? And what I'm trying to getting at is that I think major 15 and 16, you do want to end with G, the solo G, not together. I don't know. There's something, I can't tell you why yet, because I don't know the piece that well. But that's something that you can maybe ask why. Yeah, again. You want to try some of it? I would love to hear you. Where is a good place? Actually, you know what? You pick up the spot, because it's this hard thing to start.
Do you want to hear the bit at 15?
Sure, yeah. Let's go somewhere around there.
Do you want to start at 13, actually? We can hear that droning thing and get into it, yeah.
That's a good point, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
It actually makes sense because you start with the 13 with that chord F G. Now you're elaborating by da 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 da, but still the structure emphasize because your first first figure ends on F sharp, second figure ends on G. So you stretch that chord into something else. Now you're making a room for the next section, 17.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think those moments, if you connect the dots with the measure 13 being established, that chord still rings in your ears, and then you introduce da 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 dum. Remember that note? Da da dum. I remember that note, right? So you're just kind of stretching the space. Yeah, exactly. And I bet there are many moments like that. I wish I knew more of it, but
and this might be a very minor thing to say too about where you started. I had you start on the drone because I was trying to figure out on this G F sharp drone that introduces this hypnotic figure, right? That I'm not sure if you're rebowing right on measure 14 for the G sharp, because it's kind of a, it's long. You're probably going to have to rebow, right? And this is a question that I have for both you, Heather, and Michelle, which is that it seems to me that, like, from my composerly brain, which perhaps is not the best brain all the time, I don't want you to rebow right on the bar line. I for some reason I want the bar line to disappear in that way, since it's such a static harmony. and I'm not sure if that's a problem that can be fixed, or if it's adjusted by bow speed, or it's sort of hard because you're going from forte and then you're decrescendoing as well in that. So this is why I said that you were so brave, because this piece is a technical challenge. There's so many things going on, especially what Michelle said at the beginning, which is the connecting of the open strings to the stopped strings of the same pitch as well. It's like, that's, whew, you're like, it's intense. So my question there is that, to think about the effect of that drone, and how can we hide the rebowing a little bit.
That's a good point. I like where you're going with this, especially when the tension that is built up from the long drawn note. What's the most beautiful part of that is right before you change a note. There's certain mystery of it. Like you've been holding this note quite some time by measure 14, right? And we get it. Like we get that friction quality. Then what, right? What comes after, right? So you could probably slow down the bow fast enough to make it in one bow, possibly. But you have to be super duper brave. You have to you have to plan a lot earlier, and maybe don't do the crescendo too much, so you have a slight less room to run to. Why don't we get into it? How about that? How about we go from 11 or 10, or simply 12? Yeah.
I don't know. I'll try.
Yeah, however you like to start.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah,
That was awesome.
I love that.
You really make me listen to you during that duration. I had a question. I was like, what is she gonna do next? What's gonna come after?
She's running on a bow. What is she gonna do? Yeah.
Right, absolutely. My next question, music like this always makes me wonder, and it's one of the biggest challenging, is how are you gonna manage between the figures? Okay, we get it, like the slur, get that, pod, the friction. But then how are you gonna connect these? Are they related? Are they separated? Are they continuous motion, or are they going against the grid? Stuff like that. So like, for instance, what you just played, measure 11 to F natural when you change from G to D. Now, how are we going to relate to that F natural to C sharp, right? Those are the questions I will be asking a lot, because otherwise it's going to just sound all kind of the same, right? So let's go back, if you don't mind, let's go back to the top. And I'll be curious, you can play it slightly slow or whatever, however you want it, but see what happens in between these slur markings. Like, examine that, like, see what happens, and you might find something new. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I hear you thinking. I can hear you working something out here. Um, that measure 8 that you just got to, that's awesome moment because we don't expect that harmony to come in at all, and in fact, it tricks you. It's guiding you to the wrong place, but then you have to reckon with it in measure 9, and you have to live with it. After that. But that moment, I would not connect that from 7 to 8 in that too easy way, because it needs to hit you hard. It needs to hit you like, oh, I just step on something not so nice, right? And it's interesting, measure 1, C sharp falling to A, and then when you come back to that same place, things are not the same, right? Measure 5, now we're going from C sharp to B flat. It's familiar but not the same. It's similar but not the same. So like these things, I found it very fascinating. What do you think, Cliff?
I mean, exactly. These are the details that draw me to this piece, and sort of what Cecily was saying. It's just like I'm pretty sure I've seen this piece, like I've run into it before, but I've never spent as much time with it until I found out that you were playing it and that we were going to talk to you about it. And it's this first movement, especially like this first miniature, is really to me something special. I sort of likened it to like it starts off sort of in this Kurtog way, where you have this 3+2, this uneven symmetry that you often find in sort of Hungarian music and such. But it also has this sort of Bach-like quality, sort of how Bach is pushing the instrument to do multiple like polyphonic sort of things. It's not just one voice; you have multiple voices to navigate. But then it sort of shapeshifts into something more akin to I don't know, like what did I say? Chirino's Caprice sort of has this intense harmonic language where it's all becomes all harmonics, and it sort of speeds up, and it has this velocity, but it's a sort of velocity that isn't about like it's not a train going down the track and building up steam. It's not a loud velocity. It's a luminous. It's like the volume that you get from like light. Like it's like you're traveling really quickly. And that's such a fascinating narrative in general that I think you have it there, and it's just about working out the details. So I think it's also like I loved what you do with these moments. This last time when you played through the whole thing, when you have the fermata moments, the first one when you hit that fermata was great. I really loved how you let again like sort of like that drone thing that we worked on before. You let the bow sort of almost get to the end, and then you continue. And it really pulls us into this thing because it's such an inward music for me, and I love music like this so much. So thank you for picking this piece, by the way. In drawing my eyes and my ears more towards this, and that's what I think. It's like these moments, like what are the moments in this piece? We sort of talked about this with the Brahms too, and I think the fermata are the pivot points, at least the sort of fulcrum where the phrasing is sort of attached, or at least the macro structure is sort of the bigger phrasing. And then to me, it's also like the really pivotal moments are also about when you have these figures that are repeated, sort of verbatim, and it says simile there as well. And so that's the thing when you get to that, especially at in measure 16, when you get to that first repeated figure, when it gives you an option, it's all about sort of consistency. It's all about keeping it exactly the same, I think, or at least that's one reading on it, right? Mm-hmm. But the question I wanted to ask you, Heather, about that was how, as a player, like, do you make the conscious decision? Do you go, hey, I'm going to decide when I get there whether I play it 3 or 4 times? Choices like this, like, why does George Benjamin say that you can do it 3 or 4 times? That's really interesting to me, personally, and I think because it works either way. But how do you decide? Do you have a decision-making process there?
No, not really. I think for both the repeats where you get an option. I think I've been erring on the side of playing it more, just because he writes like a writ on the first one and then an Untitled on the second one, and it just gives you more space to do that. But I suppose, I guess it depends how you land like on the bar before it, and if you're already maybe quieter than you think you should be, then maybe only do it 3 times. But I don't know, that's not a very compositionally way to think about it. That's more just practicalities.
Well, no, reading the room is that's musicianship right there. Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. And I think that's what it's there for too. It's just sort of like, what does it feel like?
Yeah, I think it's also like it repeats itself too. Like again, like making the harmony ring in your ear long enough. I think it needs that time to set up the next launch of 17, right? Because we forget things easily. We human beings, we don't obtain information as well as we should. So you repeat that to reinforce certain things. And also, given the dynamic change, I think maybe he knew that you just need that more repetition to get your footing. Yeah.
I'm going to break in.
Okay.
I hate to. And I'm going to ask a question on Heather's behalf, because I do think maybe I'm going to learn this on my own. And Michelle, I know you haven't put your hands on this and learned it, but I'm sure you've learned things that have similar things in them. Any hints on how to deal with these harmonics on the second page? Because I'm sure Heather's sitting there thinking, oh, I really hope she tells me how to practice these harmonics.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's no shortcut. Sorry, there's no shortcut. I remember Paganini concerto I played. There's a lots of harmonic there. First concerto. You have to put hours in it. But what's nice is I will definitely encourage you to find the amount of bow pressure you need, because a lot of times harmonics really depends on your pressure amount, and it's oftentimes more than you think. And that's what the difficulty is, as I said earlier about making it easy, but you in fact doing more work. So it doesn't go well together, isn't it? So yeah, bow pressure, bow contact point. I would advise to actually practice ponticello for a while. It will open up something, definitely there. And also finger the notes, and see where that actually is. But you're already doing such a great job. It's very clear already. And it's, these are harmonics that like packs on top of each other, right? So it rings nicely when you play more in tune too, right? So yeah, hope that's helpful.
Yeah.
I would imagine that part of the difficulty might be that you said that, the weight of the bow with harmonics is sometimes more than you think it's going to be. And with drones, it's usually less than you think it should be.
Yes.
So you kind of have both problems here. It's
Absolutely.
kind of ingenious, but also devilishly hard. So well done on making it sound so effortless. And I love your portrait of someone falling asleep as well. That whole idea, and with the head jolts and the I was thinking about how you decide, like, if you're rocking a child to sleep, well, you're going to stop that rock when the baby feels like they're asleep. That's how you decide whether it's 3 or 4 or 5 times.
That's cool, Cicely. Yeah.
Glance at the audience if they're nodding off. Yeah.
that person in the front row.
It's like the surprise symphony. You gotta, you get to wake them up. The one last thing that I had a thought for Heather was something that's we talk about, the thing I keep talking about, and I talked about this with Brahms too, is that scores have things that they tell you, and then but there's always something that isn't there per se. And one of my personal feelings is that's often where the magic happens on some level. And so when you play the score really literally, it doesn't necessarily become the music that you're looking for. In this piece, in the score, is missing, I think, any information about at least the one that I'm looking at in terms of what your bow position is. And so as Michelle made me think of this, because it's when you get to the harmonics, like a little bit of Ponticello will make them sound more of that ethereal, ephemeral thing. It'll pick up more partials. And so that makes me think that maybe there's moments before on the first page where you're not playing harmonics, where sol pont might be a choice, or excuse me, sol tasto or something. You know, it's how can you play with that to bring out the voices that you're looking for.
Oh, that would be so cool to practice without the drone, and then with that in mind, and then add the drone back in. Yeah, that would be very interesting. Huh.
All right. I'm gonna say thank you very much to Heather. This is like a Webern piece. You could spend like 6 hours working on 2
Bingo. Yeah.
But thank you so much, Heather, for bringing this to us. I think you were one of the first participants to write to me and say, "Is this the kind of thing you're looking for?" And I said, "Yes, this is exactly what we're looking for." So, thank you very much, Michelle. I'm gonna tell you that you can mute yourself and get your violin out and do what you need to do, because you're in the hot seat. Thank you, Heather, very much.
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah.
It is time for you to introduce briefly, because I want to have plenty of time for the playing, briefly introduce this piece that you and Michelle are kind of premiering in front of us. So tell us about it.
So as Michelle said, this came about, and right around the time when we knew that we were going to do this masterclass, and Michelle was like, "Hey, would you like to write a quick thing?" And I said, "Yes, it's great." And as I usually do, I was like, "Oh, I'll just write a quick thing," and then I got way more involved than I would. But Michelle sort of saved me in this sense and gave me something to work off of, in the same way that the Tesla Quartet commissioned used Beethoven. And my piece was based around the Beethoven. This one is based around Bach, and it's based around it's the Andante movement, the third movement from the A minor Sonata and Partita, right? I'm forgetting exactly the numbers and such right now, but which has this kind of constant bass line. And so, sort of like the George Benjamin, there's this really contrapuntal aspect to the violin that Bach is doing. And I think it was George Enesco I found in just the score that I happened to be looking at when I started looking at it, was a version that said that George Enesco said that the bass line was like footprints in the snow. And Michelle, like she said, was playing this on sort of a moment of trying to find solace while all these sort of hate crimes were happening. And it's been a really intense year in that sense. And so I sort of imagined place of solace, which for me, growing up in Vermont, might be sort of a winter landscape on some level. I really do love winter, although I'm getting older, so winter doesn't love me as much. But footprints in the snow really is an image for me. That's something I grew up with a lot. But maybe when you move to the city or something like this, if one does, or you go to somewhere where people have walked through the snow a lot, for some reason the idea that it was based around trying to find solace during hate crimes it made me think of the weight of all the history involved with the Exclusion Act for Chinese folks. Is maybe one of the first bills of immigration that passed in the United States in the 19th century. That was sort of anti-Asian in that sense, and it made me think of like, oh wow, we've been through so much. There's a long time, and so I thought of there being a lot of footprints in the snow, because this is not the first time we've been to this moment. This moment has been happening for a long time. And the same thing for BLM as well here in the U.S. And I'm not trying to be too political about it, but in a poetic sense, the weight of that really crushed me on some level. And my way out was to take the bass line, the footprints in the snow that Enesco said from the Bach, and sort of overlay that bass line again and again, transpose it sort of and pull a little piece of it. And so there's like these cannons that run through. They're not exactly cannons because the rhythms are sort of more improvisational. But there is the original bass line does run throughout the entire piece. But maybe the point of the piece is that is really hard to find. Like the original thread is sort of a difficult thing to find, and the voices are all interacting and interrupting each other in a way that sort of confuses the issue, but also I did want there to be a sort of resilience to that. Like you do have to, so the title is Overwintered Tread, which is footprints, but overwintered meaning to sort of the idea of surviving something. And we just had come out of winter during the COVID pandemic. And so that struck me as well as sort of being there. So it's
that's
yeah, as usual, I have way too many things going on in my head when I write.
That's a lot for a 3-minute piece.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that. I just am really excited to hear it. I saw you post a bit of it on Facebook, and I was like, oh my goodness, I don't even know how to read this music. And then you sent me the score, which was really nice of you to do, and you've got more pages of instructional notes than you have of score, which I think is good because you need it. But it's in what you call proportional notation. We'll talk about that in a bit. I'm also very curious whether the Debussy Footprints in the Snow has anything to do with this, but maybe not. There's a piano piece, Footprints in the Snow. But are you ready, Michelle?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is written for us, for this class, for Michelle. I'm like getting really emotional about that. So thank you. And let's hear it.
Thank you. Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Wow. I'm just going to let the two of you talk.
Okay. So, what can I do better?
Straight to it, Michelle. No.
Give me straight. Yes.
No. This is great. This is great. We have a very solid beginning. I love the beginning. You nail the sort of batuto figure in that sense, where it really has this sort of more icy sort of thing, with introducing the sort of the idea of snow on some level. But I'm just sort of looking. You know, I mean, in many ways, I will admit freely that this piece is very much an experiment on my part as well. So it's a bit of a piece where, as I sort of I think was trying to say earlier, that there's this bit of getting lost within the thing. So it's not always super clear about where phrases end and begin, and we talked about this when we did the thing, right? And this was something that when I wrote it, I think I had very clear ideas about how that happens, which of course have sort of escaped me now. And especially when we worked on this, you were like, "Hey, is this the phrase that you want?" And I was like, "That's a great question." And in the way that the Bach is as well, and sort of what we've been talking about in general throughout the Brahms and the Benjamin, I think that there's a level of there's a lot of detail in the score about what, like, technically, because there's a lot of technique-based stuff like brush tremolos or circular bowing or sort of harmonic pressure on things and stuff. That there's also a lot of detail that isn't there. For example, how bowing works in general. Like, do you rebow? You know, like, there are long sustained tones that, you know, that aren't probably doable within one bow stroke or whatever.
Yeah.
And so,
one thing I know about you, and now this is like what, my third piece playing your music. Yeah. One thing I know about you and I really appreciate is there's nothing accidental about it in the music. Like the way that you're scoring, there's nothing accident. Like, for instance, even the tiniest space that you put it in between the red lines and ends and where the next note begins, you mean every inch of that. And I try to like take a great consideration on this kind of stuff because I know what it means to you. So like I want to like deliver that as accurate as possible and as significant as possible. But one thing that was hard for me is to, as you mentioned, phrasing, but also just understanding the spacing, the durations of the notes, but which comes with the phrasing, right? So that was a little bit still a challenging. But would you like to go from page by page? Because last time when we had a little talk about it, I really enjoyed the way that you talked about each page in a way that,
yeah. I mean, I think, and that's one of the things I can show my hand a little bit as a composer here, where on the first page we have a lot of sort of not necessarily, you know, normal playing per se, but there's not the techniques that are being asked for are the usual ones, I think. We have some harmonics, we have some tremolo here and there, we have arpeggiations. Batuto might be the most outlandish thing that opens the piece, right? And so the way that I block this out, and this is sort of maybe one of those kind of Franco Donatoni qualities, whose music I was really into when I was doing my master's, just because of his ability to take a kernel of music and sort of invent all these incredible things out of it. But also his, what I can't remember exactly the term he uses in Italian, but it's basically like, it's not pages, but he has events happen in terms of like when the pages turn. So sometimes I think of the pages, and I did for this piece, where page to page you have a different focus of technique, which sort of allows the sound world to sort of change. So the second page is a lot more harmonics. There's a bit more of let's see. just sort of looking really quickly. It's sort of like page 1, but it's a bit different. There's a bunch of arpeggiations that are back to back. I think there's just more density, but also there's density in terms of like vertical harmony type stuff. But also on the second page, I was also trying to create more space between the notes as well. So there's also a bit more negative space. Negative space is creeping into the music. And then on the third page is when the brush tremolos, which is when Michelle's like rubbing the bow up and down in the direction of the string, right? It sort of diffuses the pitch and it sort of gets rid of what's happening, and that's juxtaposed with circular bowing. And then also there's a fair amount of harmonics that are happening as well. So either you have a stopped pitch that's sort of being erased to some degree, or you have a harmonic, sometimes an artificial or natural harmonic that pops up the register and makes the notes much higher. Maybe kind of like a little bit like Benjamin. There's some evaporation that's happening as well. And that's sort of the general trajectory. And the marking at the very beginning is cantabile and then respirabile, which is sort of, I don't know if I've ever actually seen that in a score per se, but it means like breathable in the same way that cantabile means singable.
Right.
And so that's sort of Cecily said that we might talk about proportional notation a little bit. And so what's happening in this score too is that it's not scored like the other pieces that we've heard today, and what like a lot of pieces are, where the note, the duration of a note is indicated by the note head, or like the beaming, where a 16th note has 2 beams and such. But instead there's red lines to indicate sustain, and then the other notes are short notes. So that's my first big general sweeping thing about what could be a little better is, I think, since this is so new to both of us on some level, right? That right now it's not breathing as much as I would like, and I think that has to do with where there is negative space. You can sort of cheat a little bit. So without looking at the score, I can tell people that each system has 3 measures essentially, and each measure is supposed to be about 6 to 8 seconds long. And maybe the trick to this is that I'm wrong, and maybe 6 seconds is far too little. Maybe it needs to be more like 8 to 10 seconds. And this is a constant problem for me as a composer, is that I, for some reason, like if you say quarter note equals 60, like I'm immediately at like quarter note equals 50. Like I have like a slow heartbeat or something. But I really do like the sustain and everything when it's dense and everything is happening the proper way. But I think when we get to page 2, there needs to be a little bit more, especially when we hit measures that end with sort of the staccato marking. And I've used staccatissimo markings to just really drill home that like short, like cut off, clipped.
Okay.
And the point here is that they're clipped by silence, not by another note.
Right.
And so my intention here is, let me see if there's the first time this.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Where that might happen is that there's space.
The second system, second page.
Probably, yeah.
It's the most sparse, and also the low voice has that ping quality, right? So starting at the second system after the fermata, you go. Right, so that line somehow has to work with other things.
And that's is it possible to share screen just for a second? Can we show people that
that would be great.
That might be helpful.
You should be able to screen share, either one of you. Let me know if it doesn't
Okay, cool. I have it. I can do it right now. So then you can not have to navigate that. So we're talking about this second system passage right here. And
I was only playing the bottom, the stem down.
And so to reveal my hand again as a composer, the stems down here are sort of non-transposed bass line. Like every stem that's going down is, and I think this is the might be the second A phrase. Anyway, from the Bach. This is literally the Bach. Like this is just the bass line, and it also is the rhythmic quality is exactly from the Bach as well. There's some notes that are sort of erased, like if they're held notes or something like this, or they're repeated a number of times. But that F to E to to D is very much the Bach bass line. So
yeah. The following system, Cliff, the last measure of that also, as I was working on it, just something clicked in with me about the discussion we had 2 weeks ago, making that sparse moment, and I appreciated that. I don't think I really played it well, but have that pianissimo PPP again, evaporation of what you're saying, and the articulation changes throughout that measure. It's maybe you know what, maybe it needs more time after all. So right,
I think you need to cheat,
to go
not
back
do
to
what
your
I told
point.
you.
To go back to your point that maybe it just needs that extra few seconds.
It might be that every measure needs to be more like 10 seconds, and I think that will let it breathe a lot more.
To be fair, I didn't measure myself, so I don't know.
right. Well, and that's sort of the point too. Yeah, that's the reason for using this notation as well is in part because one, just in terms of how much time we had to prep this and to write it and such, wasn't a horrible amount of time, like not a lot of time. So I didn't want to load you up with tons of rhythms to figure out, and so I took away rhythmic stuff, and that's why proportional notation for this, on some level. And
I did think that I think what you have is very clearly communicative. But in terms of phrasing, if you sometimes stopped the line in, for instance, I see the third system in the second page, measure 2, it kind of has abrupt ending to that. And what if the lines stop there and restart? I don't know. That's just the thought.
The beams
really maybe giving you something extra.
Do you mean the beaming or the red lines?
The continuation of the black line, the beaming. Beaming.
So that's sort of one of the things about the beaming is actually indicating to you, which it's more of a structural thing, and it's not necessarily. This is what did I say when I posted this to social media? Was it's a bit Augen music, right? It's eye music. There's a structural thing that's happening on the page that the performer, when they see the score, can see, but it's not necessarily particularly something that informs the moment to moment aspects of the music. It's a decision that I struggled with in terms of doing this, and I thought about, hey, maybe I should just take away everything, take away the beaming in general, and just create, because that would help you with, I think, see the negative space. You'd feel less confined.
Suppose so. Yeah. Right.
Because the beaming is really, I think it does have a general effect of containing you.
Yeah, we're so used to that, right? We're used to seeing that what's together, what's not together. But your comma definitely helped a lot.
Right. And so maybe there also need to be more commas is the thing to really.
Yeah, the commas were these double lines or something. Yeah. Should we play with the score up? Should we play one more time? Do we have time, Cecily?
Yeah, we can do whatever you two have time for. We're not going to be kicked out. So,
Okay.
And I'm just going to throw in a few things. But are you happy to play it through again? That would be
No,
great.
I'm happy to play again.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the things that sort of come to my mind as a listener and reactor to this is that despite the fact that you have so much sort of, I love the idea of Augenmusik, like music for the eyes. There's so much to kind of look at and be dazzled by in front of you. But I had and it might just be my mood tonight, but I had a very emotive reaction to it, which is kind of exciting because it's not just cerebral, right? There's so much and knowing exactly what the Bach is. And Michelle, would you? I'm not going to ask you to play the Bach, but could you just remind our listeners what the beginning of this Bach sounds?
The beginning, yeah, sure.
Perfect. So it's that movement of Bach.
Yeah.
That's sort of in the background there, which is also one of those that just like it pulls you. At least I always feel like this sort of fateful pull towards the center and probably, Michelle, that's probably why you're drawn to it in this time of seeking sort of comfort, and I love the word solace for that. So that's really amazing to feel and react to. And then the other thing that I just want to, rather than go through and demonstrate every effect, because there are a lot of effects that you're using in this, I urge people listening, and I'm going to be like trumpeting this loud and clear to everyone I know, that they need to watch this on YouTube after the fact, after this happens today. But I urge people to not concentrate on what Michelle's doing, what she's doing with her bow, or whether she's doing Colegno on the bridge or away from the bridge, or all these different things, but rather really think about the sounds and sort of the feeling of the sound as it hits you as a listener. Because it can be easy to be sort of swept away by, what's she doing next? Is that a quarter tone? I don't, all these different things. But I think it's a brilliant use of the instrument to depict feelings. And bravo, Cliff, for that.
Thank you.
To get there, I think. Those were my initial impressions of it, and I'm gonna I'm on Michelle's side. We like commas.
We sure do.
Violinists like commas. It's a real it's sort of a thing that tells us, yes, breathe here for as long as you need to. So if there is a way to use that, the beaming is cool because it gives you sort of a structure to what you're looking at. I was imagining what it would look like without those beams, and it might be overwhelming to see, because they sort of bring everything together.
Yeah.
So,
it's like a blanket, right?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
a sky that hugs you. Yeah.
And the idea that you've given this different sort of notation to eliminate the complications of sorting out rhythms is so smart. And on the other hand, like, for certain people, they look at this and go, what?
Well, and I think there's a lot of trust there too. It's one of those things, you start handing, there's a reason why Barrio had the was it the flute sequenza renotated, like in it was the late 90s or early 2000s maybe, or something. I can't remember exactly.
He actually wrote out what he meant.
Right. Well, and I think he even said that he got sick of how much liberty everyone was taking with it on some level, which I think is a funny thing. As a composer, I sort of like, I think of this notation as being more flexible and being more interpretive for the performer. So I don't have that problem per se. And also this is one of the things too that the difference between the score and Michelle playing the violin is the world to me on some level. It's, for me, I don't claim that the score is music, because it's a roadmap to music, and it contains something about music. It's very much informed by a relationship with music, which is both my relationship, but also sort of a more grander tradition through history and such. But for me, the music happens when Michelle does this, when she reads the score. So and I think something about again, I'm always sort of talking about hiddenness, which is like usually if in a concert, you don't get to see the score, and the performer's just playing, and you get that. And so there's always something already being hidden from you, and the score is usually hidden from you. So this is always a fun thing, and thank you for being game for playing along with a shared score as well. Do you want to do that for the second time through?
Let's do it, and that'll be a nice way to end this wonderful, absolutely phenomenal time with the two of you. So, Cliff, I think we stopped the screen share, so if you could just reinitiate that, and we'll have another hearing of this. Yeah.
Perfect. All right.
Thank you, Cliff. Thank you, Cicely. Thanks, Mark.
Extraordinary stuff. Thank you both for being game, for doing that live on Zoom, and with that. Yeah, I thought that had that breathing. I don't know if that was more time or whether it was just hearing it a second time, but I got the sense of breath.
Yeah, I sure enjoyed it more.
And as usual, I loved the sirens kicking in right at the end. Is always just,
welcome to New York City.
And I'll tell you, we're actually having quite a windstorm here in the UK. So I'm in the attic of our house, and it sounds like the wind, and that's been going on all night. It was especially noisy when Heather was playing, so it's kind of been
wow, perfect.
Perfect. I'm in the basement and having the completely different experience here.
So I think that's just a beautiful way to end our class. I don't know if anyone has any questions, but feel free to send them my way, and I can pass them on to Michelle and Cliff, and maybe get back to people. You've been so generous with your time and your brilliance, and I just can't thank you both enough. It's really extraordinary. So just a few words about next week. Next week is the last really big class. I'm going to close the doors to the really big class, at least for now, and until we get sent into another lockdown. Knock on something that doesn't happen. But next week we have Elizabeth Kufroth joining us with German composer Moritz Eggert. I have no idea what they're going to do. It's going to be amazing. We have one of these caprices by Cliff. Can you tell me how you say this composer's name? Scirino's.
Chirino?
Yeah. So we've got
Chirino.
One of those caprices next week. We also have a movement of Debussy Sonata, so that'll be a nice contrast as well. If anyone is compelled to send a donation, PayPal is still open. We'll go directly to our performers and to my guests. And yeah, it's been an honor. So thank you very much, and we'll end the live stream there.